Welcome to One Mission, the podcast. Thank you again for joining us. I am Rick Lance, state missionary with the Alabama Baptist State Board of Missions. And this is an opportunity for us today to hear from our convention president, Buddy Champion. Buddy has currently been the pastor of First Baptist Church Trussville for a number of years. He's been a pastor in First Baptist Decatur, Siloam Church in the Selma area, and he's an outstanding leader. He's proven that. You think about being president of the convention, which he's served now for more than a year in that capacity, presiding over any convention meeting, even the easiest one, is not altogether easy, and he did a remarkable job with that. So we have a leader among leaders for Alabama Baptists among us today, and we'll have an opportunity to hear from him. But let me first say, as an aside, with a little bit of humor, you've heard of Rick and Bubba. Today you have Rick and Buddy. So we begin that and just simply getting to know our convention president better. Buddy, good morning.
Good morning. Probably in there was a fat joke somewhere where Rick and Buddy, because I see your physique and I see mine. I'm the Bubba of the group, I guess. I don't know
about that necessarily, and I'm not real sure we'd be as popular as they are.
Not at all.
Nonetheless. And for those of you who are listeners, this is an informal conversation that we're having. It's nothing formal about it, and so you'll detect that as we go on. Buddy, we've had several of these episodes, and previously we've had Dr. Willie McLaurin, who's the interim president of the SBC Executive Committee. We've had Robert Smith, one of the premier preachers in my mind, in Alabama Baptist life, Southern Baptist life. We kind of adopt him and make him one of our own. And then we had recently Dr. Paul Chitwood, who is currently the president of the International Mission Board. Well, today we want to talk to you as an Alabama Baptist and also with a word of gratitude, let you know how much we appreciate you. And that is meaningful. Everywhere I go and your name is mentioned, it is always mentioned with a sense of gratitude and praise. And I'll tell you, not everyone gets that. So you're one among few be able to get that. Buddy, tell us a little bit about this more than a year now serving as president, maybe some surprises, some times of gratification, what it's meant to you, what you've seen, and what you foresee in days to come.
I think in the presidency, you're allowed a lot of opportunity to see the different facets of the convention and of the missionaries and their work. And I was thinking this morning, I was driving down, really, I see my role as more of a servant support for what you know better than I do because you're a part of it every day. We've got a great team of missionaries here in the facility, but literally around the state as they go every day to serve in different areas. And wow, if there's anything we can do in the servant role of the presidency, it would be to enhance their work that they've been called to do. And no one knows their work better than they do because they're in the trenches every day. And whatever we can do to support their needs and support their vision and things that they're seeing that needs to happen in the state convention, whether it's disaster relief or discipleship or whatever, maybe through my leadership we could enhance that and help them do what they're called to do. And I just think they do it with a great attitude. They serve with a great attitude. And it's just a privilege that First Baptist Trussville and Baptist churches all over the state can come together and make it happen. Yes. As we join our forces together, do far more together than we can individually. And it's just a neat thing to see that unfold and see that take place, whether it's right now in Selma with the disasters that are going on there and all kind of seminars and opportunities and meetings and just a privilege to see that and witness all that come together.
Yes, and Buddy, thank you for that. We don't often get a lot of kudos because we're kind of behind the scenes. I had a sermon series years ago, if you allow me to reflect on it. The series was entitled Saints Behind the Scenes, Unlikely People Who Did Unlimited Things for God. And I have been amazed at some of the unsung heroes, not only in church life in convention life often are those who we might use in military terms do the grunt work. Mm-hmm. They're never necessarily going to be on the platform, but what happens on the platform, they've helped make happen. Mm-hmm. They're always going to be supportive, and every now and then at opportune times, and we can say thank you just like you did, mm-hmm. that means the world to them. And I know our state missionaries will be listening to this, and they'll take very much homage to that. They'll recognize that you've done that with a heartfelt.
And I found in my ministry, Dr. Lance, that the hard work is often done behind the scenes.
Absolutely.
The stage and the platform, that's I won't say it's easy, but nor it's important as well. But the grunt work, as you mentioned, the hard work, the difficult decisions, that happens often where no one ever knows. And if missionaries, and they are, behind the scenes, you know they're doing the hard work. They're helping churches that are struggling. They're helping pastors that are hurting and feel like throwing in the towel. And they're encouraging people all across the state in areas that no one ever knows. Right. And it's a privilege to be a part of that.
Well, while we're talking about the presidency, I might mention to our listeners, not everyone knows this, and not all Alabama Baptists for certain, and not all the decision makers sometimes know this. But the way we're set up in our Alabama Baptist State Convention work, the president of the convention is not a functionary person who just presides over the convention. It's a working position. He is automatically the chair of the executive committee of the State Board of Missions, and that's where a lot of the action happens. Things begin there. And in one respect, I would have to say, from my standpoint, as my executive leadership point of view, I need to work and should work, and I'm delighted to work with all the board members, but the executive committee is a smaller steering committee, and as chair of that, that's almost like being chairman of the deacons and chairman of the personnel and chairman of the finance all rolled into one in a local church. There's only one other state convention that's like that, and we're not modeled after the SBC in this regard. The SBC president is not. He's a member of the executive committee, but he's not the chair. So therefore, proportionately, the president of the convention is far more influential on Baptist, called Alabama Baptist, and in proportionality than the SBC president is, because of the function of the chair of the executive committee, where a lot of this grunt work we're talking about takes place in convention life. So you've done that remarkably well. I've been in your chair before eons ago, and I recognize there's a lot of heavy weight sometimes that has to be lifted, but you're a big, strong guy. Buddy, tell us about your family, if you will, and especially bring us up to date. Those of us have been really praying for Grace. Give us an update on how she's doing, as well as tell about the rest of the family.
Yeah, Lynn and I, my wife, we grew up at Lakeside Baptist Church, and my mom was a pianist there, so I grew up on the piano bench and was part of Lakeside all my life. And my mentors, my examples were Earl Chew, and then, of course, Mike McLemore after that, and Ray Wood a little bit as well. And so as I look back on that journey, I think, wow, that's some good men to watch in the pastorate, and they both did a wonderful job, or all three did a wonderful job in their tenures at Lakeside. And we met at Lakeside and went to Southwestern Seminary, and after we got married, and came back to Shiloh, and then First Baptist Decatur, and now in First Baptist Trussville. So we, fortunately, and kind of unreal that we've bounced around Alabama all these years. And we have 3 daughters. Macy is our oldest. She works at UAB Hospital, and her husband is a coach and a teacher. And they love the journey they're on right now. And another daughter is Daly, and her husband's a pharmacist down in Mobile, and they live in Fairhope, and she's a therapist down there. And then Grace is the one that's been on this 11-year journey now of an undiagnosed condition that we really can't determine what it is. It's some kind of inflammation in her cerebellum, and that causes balance and tremors and that difficulties there. And it comes and goes. They find medicines that help for a little while, and then the medicine's effectiveness goes away. And then some medicines you can't stay on forever because of the negative impact of that. So we're still on that roller coaster, and we go to Mayo Clinic often trying to discover what else can be done. But it's just an undiagnosed condition that they've not seen before, and the inflammation they can't identify even with biopsies. And so it's just one of those unreal deals that you find yourself on. But, sometimes you see her and she's looking great, and sometimes she's not looking so good. It just depends on whether we're on the high of the roller coaster or the low. So,
right. Well, you tell her, especially after the meetings we have going on today and tomorrow, when you get back home, tell her that we are continuing to pray for her.
Yeah. And we also have a fourth daughter,
yes,
a niece that came to live
That's
with
right.
us that is now number 4. So I have a house full of girls.
Well, you have a dormitory.
Yeah.
Girls
They're
dormitory.
growing up, though.
Well, that's good. And it's always good to see children launch well and do well, and sound like yours are doing remarkably well. And tell us a little bit about First Baptist Trussville. It's one of our premier churches. If you don't know much about Trussville, the city of Birmingham has expanded in different directions. South is one that's certainly been a direction of growth, and now demographically it's grown east and northeast. So it's certainly encompassed and even gone beyond Trussville. So you've been there more than 15 years, right?
Right.
And
right.
tell us a little bit about the journey there.
It's been a good place, but really it's a good place that I, in a sense, had nothing to do with. Serving at Shiloh down in Selma Association, it's got its own demographic and its own unique specialness. Decatur is a whole different realm, and Trussville is that suburban outside of Birmingham, neighborhoods everywhere. It's a good city, but there I had an opportunity, or have an opportunity, to follow Richard Francis, Dewey Corder, Gary Hollingsworth,
right?
Great pastors and leaders, and so they've as Andy Westmoreland used to say, they planted trees that I enjoy the shade of,
right.
And they've done such a wonderful job leading up to my coming that I just try not to mess it up, try to keep the baton running. And but it's been a good journey. That the culture of that church is one of reaching people, they have a passion, and I don't know for how many years, but it's a real passion to reach the next generation, the children, the students. So they're always willing to invest resources in that, whether it's building or budgets or energy or whatever. They're excited about that. But we're a church. We're not a young church. We're not an old church. We're I say healthy numerically across the board.
Yeah.
Strong senior adult presence, bed babies everywhere. So it's kind of a neat. As a pastor, trying to lead those just different generations, kind of a challenge.
Right, that's true.
But as far as the strength that brings to the table is pretty fun. That you've got all kind of different backgrounds, and even in the demographics of who we are as a community now. There's those that have lived there when there was one red light in Trussville years ago.
I remember that.
And then where they are today, and some rarely leave Trussville, and some travel around the world every week, So it's just a different demographic, but it's a lot of fun.
Yeah, you've just described having served in a rural area, essentially, having served in a county seat town, and now in a solid suburban church, which is, as I say, one of our premier churches. And I might add, to personalize it a bit, and as a host, you have to be careful about doing that. I know all 3 of those predecessors you mentioned. Richard Francis was about a third cousin by marriage, and knew him well. He was the one who witnessed to me and led me to the Lord. Wow. And we go way back. We went way back, and I had part of his funeral in 1988. I remember that real well. Yeah. Dewey Corder, I kind of helped recommend him there at that particular time. Dewey did a good job. He's highly relational, as you well know, and you are too. It's packaged a little bit differently. But Dewey served well and continued up to his death by means of COVID at a church that grew rather significantly, mainly by senior adults in that area. Yeah. And then Gary Hollingsworth has been a friend for a long time. Gary served with the North American Mission Board. He's been at Emmanuel Church in Little Rock, which is a significant church. And then again, I was instrumental in recommending him to the South Carolina convention position of my counterpart there. And he is one that I cherish as a friend. So you've had 3 outstanding predecessors, and you're doing a very fine job too. Tell us about the staff. What kind of staff do you have?
Oh, we're all knuckleheads in a way, but we're all struggling and working, trying to stay on the same team. Staff, for me, I think it was George Bush that said, I don't have to be smart, I just got to have smart people around me.
That's right. And, he's not the first that said that,
yeah,
he said it.
Yeah, which works, by the way.
Yes, it does.
The staff there, they are incredible in their field of service, if I could use that terminology, whether it's preschool or children or middle school or high school. We got some outstanding leaders on the staff. And, I'm 60, turned 60 not long ago, which to me sounds incredibly old.
Well, you don't look it.
But I find myself watching the middle school ministry or watching the high school ministry. Some of the crazy things they come up with that I think that is the dumbest thing I've ever heard in my life. But it works.
Sure.
I mean, they'll have kids show up out of the woodwork. It's just amazing. So I find myself having to really trust the staff, and I do, in some of their unusual approaches to reaching children or middle schoolers or high schoolers or whatever. I'm like, well, I would have never tried that. But then you have, 25 kids come to Christ, and you think, well, who am I to critique that or whatever? So they're a great staff and do a wonderful job. And for us, not only do you need people smarter than you in their areas of service around you, but the team aspect is very important for us. We eat lunch every week together, and it's kind of a mandatory time that we spend not talking about work. We just talk about life. And so we really work hard on developing a team and having a team that's a true team, that I'm one of the many members, and then we try to keep those relationships strong, that we're really friends. And I love it when they hang out with each other and go out to each other with their families on Friday night or whatever, because they just like each other. And that doesn't always come easy, but we really worked trying to make sure we are what we would think of or imagine a true team that really cares for each other and likes each other. And so they do a great job.
And that translates, because of that kind of arrangement and that kind of camaraderie and synergy, just lends itself to have a healthy church. Healthy leaders and healthy churches go together. If you have unhealthy leaders, can't expect to have a healthy church. So therefore, if you've got the right kind of team, even a slightly unhealthy church or even profoundly unhealthy in time can become healthy.
Right.
So it's a process. So thank you for sharing that. As we look to, if we could, look under the hood a little bit in your life, and could you give us 1 or 2 lessons that you have learned in ministry that you think were really turning points, lessons of experiences that were just really turning points? I'm not talking about textbook lessons. I'm talking about life lessons that really made a difference.
I think in the ministry, one of the things I've learned, I need to have vision. I need to understand where God wants the church to go, not as Buddy Baptist Church, but as here's the people that God wants me to shepherd, and where does God want, because this church existed before I got there, and it's going to exist when I leave. And that little 78-year-old lady has been there for 50 years. I don't want to come in as a pastor and totally disjoint her journey with Christ, with whatever change that may be. I don't like change a lot. I like transitions. So I really trust God to help me to lead in such a way that he or she or I don't have an agenda. I just want to follow God. Where do you want this church to go during my tenure? And it's your church, and I'm just shepherd of it for this season. So where can I servantly lead that place? So that's I kind of had to get me out of the way and what I liked and what I want, and because it really doesn't matter. It's where does God want his church to go? And I've discovered I don't have to have all the answers, but those pews in any church, I feel there's some great people in those pews that want to help their pastor.
Salt.
Last night, I had a meeting that I was stuck, a difficult situation in the church and didn't know how to manage it and walk through it. So I bring some men around saying, what do I do? And they're so willing to invest and help and guide. And so that in my life lessons, I don't have to have the answers. I've just got to trust people to help me. And they so want to help their pastor and their church and the cause of Christ. And so I've just learned that if I can surround myself with great men and women of the faith that are full of wisdom and grace, and together we can see God do some cool things.
Well, that's well stated. And just an observation right off the top of my head, that's strong leadership, but in a soft and subtle way. Mm-hmm. What you're doing then is not just making it you're not singing a solo, you've got at least an ensemble singing along with you. That's very good. You made a statement that I think is very important. When people talk about change, they're okay with it if they think the change is for somebody else to do and not themselves. So change can be a negative experience. And your idea of transitions, that's very good. I think the best change, unless you're in an emergency, the best change is incremental change, which brings those transitions. Mm-hmm. And you look back and it's hardly new that you had a change happen. It just incrementally, you brought people along, and it really made a big difference. Well, one other thing I'd like for you to do for our listeners, would you offer an encouraging word for ministers and lay people today in this chaotic environment in which we live, just from the bottom of your heart? What would you say to them?
Yeah. It seems like yesterday I was a young gun. You know, I was one of the young guys. And all of a sudden you wake up and you're 60 or you're 55 or you wonder about retirement. Will I ever get there? And what does that look like? And it happens so fast. And the journey that we've been on is so fast. And yet during that course of the journey, you get so tired sometimes. And you get so exhausted of the ministry and the demands and being a dad or mom or whatever. And don't give up. Don't throw in the towel. Don't get so tired you make poor decisions and that are going to hurt your ministry. And it's worth it. As I look at 60, I think, man, I just want to finish well. I don't want to, all that God's done in the last 30-something years as I've been a pastor, I don't want to mess that up for the cause of Christ. For his, he doesn't need me for his reputation, but I sure don't want to hurt that.
That's right.
That's right. I just want to finish well, and it just happened so fast that now I'm worried about finishing as opposed to starting, and that transition was so quick.
Yeah, somewhere in the continuum of beginning well and finishing well, we have this continuing well. Right. And that's what you're talking about, doing, continuing well so that you can finish well. Mm-hmm. That is very well stated. Well, dear people, we have had an enjoyable time of discussion and conversation with our convention president, Buddy Champion, a dear friend, a very loyal servant of the Lord, and certainly someone who's endeared himself so much to Alabama Baptist. And today, uniquely, we've had our own version of Rick and Bubba, so it's Rick and Buddy. And it has been a joy to have the convention president, Buddy, to be with us. And he is a very approachable, amicable individual and an outstanding leader. This time has been well spent. Thank you again for listening, and we'll look forward to the next time we gather for One Mission, the podcast.